G'day and welcome to Reality Check. Before we start this week's show, here's a little bit about our sponsor for this week. Dr. Stephen Gundry has this concept called caloric bypass. He says the key to losing weight and keeping it off is not in carbs or fat or even in probiotic-rich foods. Instead, it comes down to a specific switch you can flip in your body to flush out unnecessary calories. And by activating this specific process in our body, he says he's seen thousands of people dramatically improve their health, even at age 50 and beyond. Dr. Gundry has lost 70 pounds himself using his research, and he's kept the weight off for over 20 years and counting. His digestive issues are gone, his health is fantastic, and he feels younger and healthier today than he did in his 40s. His video's been watched by over 20 million people to date, and you can watch and learn more about it at thehealthyfat.com/Ross. That's thehealthyfat.com/Rost. It's linked at the bottom of this video, and just click thehealthyfat.com/Ross. Now, let's get on with the show. G'day and welcome to Reality Check. I'm your host, Ross Coulthart, and today we're going deep underwater to a mystery beneath. In 2011, Swedish underwater explorers were scanning the Baltic Sea, searching for shipwrecks. The Baltic Sea is an arm of the Atlantic Ocean, enclosed by Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Russia, and Sweden. In June that year, 14 years ago, they came across a very strange and unexplainable object. Their scanners picked up a large circular structure that looked as if it was constructed, designed, shaped, and it had odd markings. It's 60 metres in diameter, 90 metres deep, with a long drag mark following it, etched into the ocean floor. It's been dubbed the Baltic Sea Anomaly. And while the explorers have actually been very, very careful not to say exactly what they think it is, a lot of folk have started calling it the Baltic Sea UFO because it bears an uncanny resemblance to Han Solo's Millennium Falcon from the blockbuster movie Star Wars. For a while, the world media went nuts and the anomaly story was all over the news. The easiest explanation, and this is the one that I suspect many of you might be thinking, is that the object was just an unusually shaped lump of rock, maybe hard basalt, that happened to look like something deliberately shaped and constructed. But 14 years on from that discovery, for the team that discovered the anomalous object, Ocean X, a company led by Peter Lindbergh and Dennis Asberg, what sits 90 metres underwater in the middle of the Baltic Sea is still a mystery. Dennis Asberg still feels strongly that he and his team have not been able to do all the research work, including crucial core samples, to resolve the mystery of just what this object is. For over a decade, he's been struggling to get the sponsorship to resolve that question, trying to raise money. And for his noble efforts, he's been slurred as a scammer and a con man for trying to raise money to fund the expedition. Well, now he's looking more optimistic that he may finally get those funds together and finally get that expedition to be able to resolve this mystery once and for all. So today I introduce Dennis Asberg, one of the original discoverers of this mysterious object lying at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Dennis, welcome to Reality Check. Can I ask you, sir, do you think that this object is a Corellian T-1300 light freighter built around 60 BBY, most famously used by the smuggler Han Solo and Chewbacca before, during and after the Galactic Civil War?
You never know. No, I don't know, really. It's a long story. Of course, lots of people think that. Lots of people have mailed me or sent messages to me that this is Millennium Falcon you have found, and yeah, it's not. It's not, but it is something for sure. That's why I'm struggling with it.
Tell me the story of how you discovered this object.
Yeah, we are explorer company, treasure hunters, you can say also. Diving with salvage shipwrecks around the world and cargo from shipwrecks. And we have put our time to wrecks with champagne and cognac and wine, exclusive wine, to salvage that and sell it on the market, Christie's and so on. And our mission 2011 was to go out and find a special wreck with cognac and Benedictine, another type of booze. Um, and I think we have been out for 1.5 weeks. We were quite tired at that time, and we almost sunk with the ship. And it was a fishing ship we rented because, yeah, that's what we had at that time. Uh, and we managed to come to Finland and come up to a harbor and fix the boat. And then we decided to go out again and search in a new area for this special shipwreck that we searched for. Uh, but we searched in a new area uh, and have been out one day, and then in the night time, late in the evening, we have a new area to search for this wreck that we have never been before, really. And we were quite tired at that time and frustrated also because, we have put in lots of time and money in this project, and we have not find any sign of this wreck, special wreck then. And the value, it's millions. That's what we search for. And this thing is popping up, this odd thing on the monitor.
So, what were you using? How did you detect it? Was it some sort of scanner?
Side scan sonar we use, so that we can see a 2D image of the bottom. Um, we see like 300 meters from in diameter of the bottom. Um, so we have scanned for like 2.5 hours, and then this thing popping up on the monitor. And I remember we were quite surprised. And Peter, my colleague, is looking at me and say, "Dennis, here it's a UFO." And I just, what? It's a round thing we have found there, and we began to measure it and see how the size of it, and it's 60 meters. And for me and Peter and all the other crew members, we have never ever seen anything big like that.
No.
Big things and odd things you can see, but not as big as this one.
So you have the original scan, but
Yeah.
what really caught my attention was at the end of the documentary, The Mystery Beneath, there's a much more high resolution scan that you were able to repair from corrupted computer files of another scan that was done.
Yep.
Describe to me what you see on that scan, and I'm talking about the track of the object.
Yeah. What you mean is the multi-beam image we have. Uh, it is it is a round object, 60 meters, and then you have, as you said yourself, 1,500 meters of a track on the bottom. And before that, you have like a mountain with a canyon in it. It looks like, if you play with your mind, it looks like something have crashed into the mountain and then slide on the bottom.
Now, I think
Uh,
we'll insert that multi-beam scan image in here because it is quite dramatic, and it's the moment where I sat up and thought, "Wow, this really does look like." And forgive me for saying this, but it does look like a crashed spaceship because you've got what looks like a gouge through that mountain. Then you've got an obvious track going across the sea floor for 1.5 kilometers. And then you've got the object itself sitting on a mound of silt. It looks like an underwater crash.
yeah, you're right. You're right. That's what we all thought when we saw the pictures. We laugh at it, and but at the same time, I take it serious. I think we have found something very, very interesting, and we must be very careful to talk about people with about this when we're coming home to the harbor again. And I was very sure. That's why I've never give up. I have been working with this for 10 years, and I have tried my best to get the attention from people, that people are going to listen to this and really take it serious.
So let me be the dogged skeptic for a moment, Dennis. I mean,
Yep.
obviously, I'll put to you. I have to admit, when I first saw this story, my thought was this must just be a lump of basalt rock. You know, it must be a very hard bit of rock that's somehow been exposed, and it's sitting on the surface, and it looks anomalous. It looks strange, but as you sometimes see in the ocean, there are objects that look as if
Yeah.
they're constructed, look as if they're human made, but it turns out they're not. Just to devil's advocate, why couldn't it be just a big lump of rock?
That's a very interesting rock then. Nothing I have seen before. Not my colleagues around the world that are explorers as me. I put lots of time to see if I can get any answer from people that work with the same thing as I do, and nobody have really come up with a good answer. It's not the
Okay, take
submarine base or something like that, or
take me through what is it about that object that you believe suggests that it's a constructed object, a designed object.
it's lots of things. It's not only the odd things and the structure of it. It's other things also. But in the beginning was the structure, and it's the 90 degrees angles. You have like corridors in it. You have holes in it also with frames around it.
Okay, so let's talk about the hole with the frame. Talk me through the specifics of that image, and we'll put that image in here.
Yeah. We use the ROV, the robot, and we have the multi-beam or sonar on the ROV. It's a blue view sonar. Uh, you have a 2D image of the object you see in front of you, and when we look down at the object, because with the usual camera, the visibility is almost zero. And sometimes you can 30 centimeters or 1 meter or something. But in this case, we use the sonar, and when we look down at the object, we see all the corridors, the angles, but we also see this hole 2 meters in diameter with a frame. And we were very surprised about that, of course.
So, is it exact right angles? Have you been able to measure the accuracy of those angles? I mean, could it be just a natural rock formation that's shaped like a right angle?
When I have talked to people, scientists about that, and they have seen the pictures and all the data, they say, this is very interesting. I have never seen anything like that before. So it's only on that spot also. It's not, we have nothing else there. It's this thing. And then when you look at this round thing, you have all these corners and holes and frames and so on. And it's 90 degrees angles, yeah.
There is another feature that really intrigued me, and it looks like a triangle with some kind of hole in the middle of it. Can you talk me through that?
Yeah, it was not so long ago I found that. I have so much data and films and from the expeditions we have there out there. We have been there a couple of times. The last time we were there was 2019, and I remember so well that time because we had a salvage job together with colleagues from Finland, and they were quite funny about this with the object in the Baltic Sea. And they said to me, Dennis, it's a rock. It's a rock. Yeah, perhaps it is, but a very interesting rock. Have you seen anything? No, no, but it's a rock. Okay, but next time going to go out on the Baltic Sea, you come with us with your own equipment and look at yourself. Look at this thing yourself. And they did. They did. They follow us on the ship. They used their own equipment, and even he, the person that have laughed at me, say, Dennis, this is man-made. This is constructed for sure. So,
Okay, so let's talk to the triangle. How did you obtain the image of the triangle?
wow, yeah, I because a situation we had in Sweden here with a submarine that we not have the chance to salvage. I have lots of time over, so I begin to go deeper into the pictures and analyze all the data I had, and then I found this odd thing, this sign, or as you said, the triangle with a hole in it, and I was quite surprised because I have seen it, not seen the triangle, but I have seen the pictures, but I have never really get deep into the pictures, and I did, and I saw it.
So, just to devil's advocate, Dennis, there's a phenomenon in UAP research called pareidolia, where we see things as humans and we put patterns to them. Our brains automatically look for patterns. Could it be that what we're doing is our brains are seeing patterns where essentially it's a natural formation?
Yeah, of course can it be like that, but in this case it's not one thing, it's not two things, it's lots of things only on this structure. So when you find something that sticks out, you want to search for more things that is odd and strange on this object. And I have done it, and I've seen so many strange things, not only this triangle and this frame, or it's lots of things that they are
Okay,
not
so I want that detail. Let's make your case. What are the strange things? What are the things that have convinced you that this object is constructed, that it's some form of artificial construction? It's not just a lump of rock sitting at the bottom of the Baltic Sea.
It's a number of things. I cannot say one thing. It's the triangle with a hole in it. That's one thing. It's the it's a 60-meter diameter round thing that looks like it's separated from the bottom. You have this track on the bottom also, like 1500 meters. You have these angles, you have these holes, we have also been with the ROV under it in the front of it, if you can call it that, and see lots of strange things. It's like burn material, like something have burned on it. It have been upheated. That we have seen, and that's what we have experienced when we have been down there.
So you say that when you looked underneath the object, it
Yeah,
showed some kind of burn, some kind of what, material that had oxidized somehow
yeah,
and blackened. So,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
have
When we have
have
been
you have you
under it,
been able to get a sample of that material? Have you been able to test that material?
no, we have not. We have not. That was very interesting because one of our divers in the team, Stefan Hogeborn, he was the task was to take a sample from the object. He did not manage to do that. It was too hard. And I remember when he coming up for the first time after he had been down there, he said, when I'm brushing off the sediment, it was black. And then I tried to take a sample. It was too difficult, Dennis, to take a sample.
Did he think it was rock? Was it consistent with being rock? I mean, could his chisel? I could see in the film he was using a hammer and chisel. I would have thought if it was basalt or some kind
Yeah.
of hard rock, he would at least have been able to get a chip off it.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was not down there. The only thing he mentioned for me was that it was something hard. I did not manage to take any samples from the object.
Right. So, I mean, obviously the burning is a mystery because that area of the Baltic Sea, there's no history of volcanic activity or magma
Exactly.
or anything.
Like no, it should not be. We should not be any signs of it. I have been on the Stockholm University and talked about that, and they like, whoa, that cannot be from there. It must be from the Atlantic on the melting period. It's coming there,
So
and
I just want to get my brain around the implications of this because you've got an object sitting 90 meters under the Baltic Sea, slap bang in the middle of the Baltic Sea. I know you keep the location secret, but the history of the Baltic Sea, as I understand it, is that it was created around about 14,000 to 12,000 years ago. But before that, it was basically a big lump of ice. And the implications of what you're saying are that that object, if it was there before that time, if it is a constructed object, it implies that it's some civilization before, say, 18,000 years ago when the Ice Age hit. True?
yeah, yeah, perhaps
So the
that's my
implication
thought.
is so it's either a prior human civilization or non human civilization that's constructed that object and it's sitting there, and maybe it's a relic of some past civilization, or it's an object that's fallen from the sky, perhaps through re entry, and landed on the ocean bed.
Yeah, I believe me, I have thought about that 10 years now, more than that. What can it be really? It can be something that is constructed on the spot for sure before the
Right.
ice age.
But if it was constructed on the spot before the Ice Age, how old would it have to be from your knowledge of what the ice flows were doing in that megalithic period?
Wow, good question. I mean, more than 15,000 years, something like
Wow.
that.
Now, known human civilization, and we're pretty good at this on Reality Check, known human civilization didn't really start until, let's say, 5, 6, 7,000 years ago. Something that's 15,000 plus years out is far earlier than any known human civilization, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And also having the capacity to shape rock, you need metal tools, you need specific devices that allow you to cut particularly hard rock, if indeed it is rock.
Yeah, yeah,
So, one of the other things I wanted to explore with you, Dennis, is you noticed other anomalies when you were on site. You had all sorts of weird things happening over the object. Can you talk me through what happened?
yeah. Lots of things have happened out there. The first time we were out there, we noticed that we have problems with our equipment. The ROV did not work properly, and I remember when Stefan was coming up and explained for me about taking samples. But he said also, Dennis, it's something strange because usually we have 4 to 5 Celsius plus there down there, but now Dennis was 0. I have never experienced that before. So he was, uh, very confused about the situation he had down there, and he explained for me. And that's not the only thing. Even his camera stopped working, the light stopped working, and when we talked about that, I said, "Okay, we have the same problem with the ROV, with the robot. The compass not working properly, and it feels like this thing or whatever it is don't want us to come near it. That's why we did not. It was very difficult to find the spot again with the ROV.
So you were getting some kind of what electromagnetic interference with your technology.
Yeah,
Tell me about the radar. You were getting ghost images on the radar as well, weren't you?
yeah. Well, we had almost every time, but this time it was so clear. We have anchor over the object. We start preparing for the dive, and was blue sky. The sun was shining. No ship near us. We were totally alone that time. Um, And then we look at the radar, and it's popping up like dots on the screen, like something is out there. And I remember Peter and I look at each other and say, "Okay, what is that?" And it should not be anything out here. So I take the we go out and look, and we did not see anything. But still, it's popping up everywhere around us. And I'm talking about the area of 150, 200 meters from the ship, and we have no ship there. So, yeah,
The other thing I was fascinated by is you became aware, didn't you, that there were other potential foreign navies in the area
yeah,
watching, perhaps taking an interest in what you were doing. Tell me what
yeah.
you saw.
Wow, that was a little scary, I must say, because we have anchor. That's another time we have anchored and begin to prepare for the dive and using the ROV at that time, and then it's popping up lots of ship, and that was ship. It was no ghosts. That was the navy. There was a NATO, even the Swedish navy with the coast corvette was down very close to us. Also, remember this is on Finnish economic zone. This is not the Swedish water, and even the Swedes were there with the ships. But every must be 10, 15 ships around us, laying there, lurking around.
So, from which countries?
It was NATO. It was British. It was American. It was German ships. It was French ships. Yeah, lots of
So,
ships. It was.
so there were 10 to 15 ships
Yeah,
close to where you were operating.
exactly. And we
Was
have
there any
filmed it also.
was there any plausible explanation for why they were there so close to you?
Not really. I have no clue. It was nothing about the NATO. Should have no exercise. Nothing about that.
And did you ask them? Did you hail them on the radio and ask them why they were taking such a close interest?
Yes, I did. I called them on the radio and asked them why they are so close to us because we have divers in the water. And they, yeah, they were friendly, so they move away, uh, perhaps a
What did
couple of
they say?
100 meters.
What did they say? What was their explanation for why they were taking such a close interest?
They did not give me an explanation at all, not at all. But
I
later,
understand later, sorry.
later, that was interesting because I had a meeting in the headquarters in the Swedish Navy about this later, and I asked one of the officers down there, uh, "You have a ship down there very close to us. Do you know about that? And why did you do that?" And so on. And he just looked at me. No, no, no. I have no information about that. So that was quite interesting. Of course, they
There
know.
was also that the Russians took an interest in you. Apparently, there was a submarine emitting
Yeah,
some signal that you were able to detect.
because of lots of things have happened out there. I begin to miss. Something is going on out here. It's not only we are in could be interesting in this. Must be others also. So I remember when I was home, I asked a company to borrow equipment to analyze data signals, and I borrow this thing, and I have the dummy there that tells me turn off every equipment you have on the boat, telephones, satellite telephones, and radar, and and we did it. We turn off everything, blackout totally on the boat. Um and then I just push on enter, and I did the scanning of the signals. And when we were ready with that, I when we come back to to Stockholm, I leave the information to this company, and they did the analyze of it, and I get the answer that we have a the machine have noticed a signal that is dedicated to the Russian Navy. So
Wow. So
So
you
I
think it
did
was
not
a
see any
submarine?
submarines. I did not see any submarines, and I did not see any Russian ships. but the signal was there.
This is getting more and more intriguing. One thing I wanted to ask you about, I asked you about the material on the bottom of the object, and I think you mentioned that you hadn't had it tested, but I did see an interview where you mentioned that you'd sent a sample off to, was it Israel, for testing?
Israeli.
What,
Yeah.
what did you send off for testing, and what results did you get?
No, we managed to take loose stones from the object laying on the object because we did not manage to take any samples directly from the object, and that's why we something must take up from that. So when I saw these stones, it was like a burned thing on it. So it was quite interesting to see it. And then I decided to uh, send it down to Israel because they have contacted me and they were very curious about that and they want to do analyze on it. And okay, why not? I sent it down there, and yes, I got the answer from them, and it was I did get two answers from them. One on paper and one not really on paper. But the first I got, what have you found? How you find some high tech submarine? And I was, what? What do you mean by? They mean by that? And then after that, I got a more accurate data on it, or I don't know. But they find uh, biologic bone material on it, and
Burned material. Sorry, is it burned material?
yeah, bone material on it.
Right. So, where on earth would burning come from 90 metres underwater in the Baltic Sea?
I That's the good question. I have no clue. Uh,
I mean, I guess there's a mystery there, isn't there? And just
yeah.
so I'm clear and just so our audience understand, when you scan all around that area in the Baltic Sea, are there any other kinds of rock outcrops that might remotely resemble the object that you've detected?
No, no, no. I mean, round things you can have from old mines that have exploded, but then we're talking about 5 to 10 meters in diameter. That you can find, of course. But
Right.
now we're talking about 60 meters, and it's not like like a crater either. It's something that's sticking up.
And it's not something that's fallen off a boat. It's not an old boat, or it's not an old. I mean, one of the explanations I saw was that it might be a reel from a cable company laying cables, but then it was pointed out that even the largest cable reel is only a fraction of the size of this object. Is there any kind of prosaic explanation that you can think of that might plausibly explain that object, if it is, as you believe it is, a constructed object?
No, no, I don't know. I cannot be something from the ship that have fallen off. It's too big. Um, no,
So, what are you doing now? I mean, obviously, you've done two visits to the site. Uh, are you going to go back and do more study?
that's my goal, Ross. That's my goal. I have been since I found it. It's have not been easy, I must say.
You've copped a lot of attacks, haven't you? In fact, I think there was a Fox News article that outright accused you of being a scammer, that essentially the whole thing was just a rock. Had Fox News done any research before they made that claim?
No, they did not. And I was so angry and frustrated because at that time I did my best to convince scientists, people with the knowledge to help me understand what I have in front. We have there out there, and Fox News going out with the news that this is a rock, without talking to me, without knowing where the spot is, the position, nothing. And I was so surprised. I sent them a mail. Also, I didn't, of course, not get the answer and ask them why are you going out with this information? You have not spoken to me. You have not been on the spot. You don't even know where it is. And
Did they say where they got that information from?
no, they did not answer me. So
It I guess what I find fascinating, Dennis, is there are parallels with the UAP subject here because there are a lot of people who become armchair experts when anybody suggests that there's anomalous explanations for UAPs. And all you're arguing for, you're not saying, are you, that this is a flying saucer or indeed necessarily that it's a constructed object.
Yeah,
What you're saying is that the evidence suggests that it is a constructed object and that you would like to do further investigation. Is that a fair comment?
yeah, that's how it have been from the beginning. It
And
is
so,
something in my mind. It's for me. It have been since day one something that is so odd and must be constructed. And is if it is a something is constructed on the spot, I don't know. And if it's falling down from the sky, I don't know. But I
but
want to
if it
find
was,
out.
I mean, the exciting thing is, if it was constructed on the spot, it must be somewhere between 15 to maybe 20,000 years old,
Yeah.
because that's the last time that area of land underwater was open air land.
Yep.
If it was an object that fell from the sky, then we need to explain why there are these strange right angles on the object, corridors, apparent constructed shaped framings of holes in the object, including a triangle and a square.
Yeah.
That is suggestive of construction, ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah. It is for me. For what I have seen, it's something, of course, that is constructed. And
So,
yeah,
where do you think the whispering campaign came from that you were scammers? Do you think this was just trolls, or do you think this was more organised?
I think it was organized. I mean, I we know that the Navy have been out there lurking around every time we are out there, almost every time. So they
So,
know the spot. They have, of course, been there.
so
And
you strongly suspect that the authorities don't want you to find out what this object is.
yeah, yeah, 100%.
Well, that just gets my hackles up, Dennis. I'm sorry. I just need to know more. So, what's the likelihood that you'll be doing an expedition anytime soon?
Wow, that's a good question. I hopefully this year, this summer, we can do an expedition again. That's what I hope for. Nothing is ready yet, but that's my goal.
Now, Dennis, I couldn't let you go without finally asking you one question. You have seen an anomalous object for sure, haven't you, in your life? There's a great story you tell of what happened at your home near a military base in Sweden. Do you want to tell me that story?
Wow, yeah. Yeah, that changed my life totally. I was an entrepreneur, I'm still are, but at that time I was young. I'm a family father living outside of Stockholm, not so far from a military installation. Um, in an apartment. Now I'm living out in the archipelago. But at that time, I'm living in an apartment. I have the window, uh, so I can see the military field and the construction out there. Um, one early morning, usually I sleep long time at that time because I'm working a lot. But this time I'm working. I wake up very early, like 3:30, 4 o'clock. The sun was on its way up, and I was just laying there and wondering, okay, why I'm waking up, and okay, I'm feeling fresh and nice, and my wife is sleeping still, and then after 10 minutes, I decide to go up to the kitchen and drink water. And when I'm sitting in front of the sitting in the bed, I have this big window in front of me, and I have this view of the military installation, and I see something that should not be there, and it's take me perhaps 2-3 seconds to understand that it's something odd over this area, and I begin to build up a frustration, a angriness in me. So I begin to use F words and to get my wife's attention behind me. And And I look at this thing. It looks like at that time like a cigar in front of me, and was big. It was not like something on the window or a balloon. It was a big thing. No lights, nothing, and not the surface of was rough. Also, it was brown, and it's also reflecting the lights from the sun. So it was orange, brown, yellow. Um,
Just to explain for our viewers who don't know
yeah.
what happens in Sweden in summer at 3:30 in the morning, why was there sun at that time of the morning?
Yeah, that's the nice thing about Sweden. In the winter times, it's dark almost all the time here. That's the sad thing. The summer times here in Sweden, we have, it's light almost the whole night. But this was summer. It was early. The sun was on its way up.
So you were seeing a reflection of the early sun on the shine of this object.
Exactly,
How
exactly.
big was the object?
Wow. That was something I spent the day after, or the same day after I have talked to my kids about it. We going to the spot and try to figure out how big it was. It can be 600, 700 meters in diameter. It was not a small
Wow.
little thing.
And and was there any kind of glow, any kind of light coming from the object?
No, nothing, nothing.
Any
No
noise?
lights, nothing.
Did you
And
see it move, or did it just
yeah,
hover over space?
yeah, that's the when my hair is standing up, because I was so surprised about it. I was sitting there in front of the window and look at it, and I turn around to see if I get my wife's attention, and she looked at me with big eyes, and she was scared. It's not Dennis. So, and then I turn back my head and look out at the window. It's still there. It's still there. And I hope then that my wife is going to come up and see it herself, but she did not. And I standing there and or sitting there, and then the thing happened. Then you see it like this, and then it's turning up like this.
So
And
it
when
went
that
from it
happened,
went. So it was originally looking like a cigar shape, which is
yeah,
essentially a disc looking from the side.
exactly.
But as it turned, you became aware of its particular shape. What
Yes,
shape did you see as it turned?
round. It's a round object, and
And
it was
then what
yeah.
happened?
And then I saw it just for perhaps 3, 4 seconds, and then it was like somebody is throwing a frisbee at you. It's flying away over my house,
Was it
and I
fast
was so
movement?
surprised and angry at the same time, because I did not really understand what I'm seeing. So I run over the bed over my wife. She was already scared, and now I'm running over her to the other side of the house. And I'm standing there on the balcony and look, where is it? And where is it? I was so frustrated and angry. And then after a minute, she's coming. And then the kids also. Daddy, Daddy, what's wrong?
And when it moved, how fast did it move?
I mean, nothing I have seen before.
So
It's
faster than any known
Yeah,
terrestrial
I have
craft.
never ever seen anything move like that.
And do you think it was moving intelligently? Could it have been a balloon or some
No,
kind
no, no,
of
no, no.
natural object, maybe a swarm of birds?
100%, 100%. It was something should not be there. Something have, yeah,
So
not a natural thing.
I guess the point of all of this, Dennis, is that what that event did was twig you to the fact that there are phenomena which cannot be explained.
Yeah, you know, before that, I did not think about UFOs or something like that. I look at Star Wars as many other people have done, and I was busy with my business and my success with that. And then that happened. It is like I'm burn marked with it. I cannot let it go. I think about it every day since that day.
It fascinates me, a lot of people who've had even one or two UAP encounters, it's like it seeds them with the need to know more.
Yeah,
It twigs their curiosity. Is that what's happened to you?
yeah, of course. I'm an explorer also, and then when I found this in the 2011, I get what the heck is going on? And I was so surprised. No, I'm burn marked with it. I cannot leave that, and I'm so what can I say? I'm convinced already that we are not alone. Where they are, where they're coming from, I don't know.
So, Dennis, I can't let you go without asking you, not scientifically, but intuitively, in your gut, what does your intuition tell you that that object, the Baltic anomaly, is 90 meters underwater in the Baltic Sea?
I want to be down earth. I try to be, but at the same time, I'm swishing away sometimes. But I think it is something constructed, and I think it is something that is probably constructed on the spot.
Which
Then I'm down to earth, and then I can, as I said, go away a little. After my experience, I had 2009, no, I mean 1996. I'm not surprised if we have found a crashed UFO in the Baltic Sea.
you think that it's entirely possible it could be something non-human, or it's entirely possible it could be something that was constructed before known human civilization. Either of those alternatives is mind-blowing.
Yeah, you're right. Something is.
Dennis, it's a pleasure to speak with you, and I think I speak for most of us here. All you're trying to do is solve a mystery. And that's what we love here on Reality Check. We love investigating mysteries and trying to get to the bottom of them. So I wish you the very best for your endeavours, and maybe one day we could join you on one of your future expeditions. It'd be great to see what's down in that mystery beneath. Thank you so much for joining Reality Check.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you for having me.
It's a
Thank you.
pleasure. We've decided it's time to have a regular slot where we try to answer some of your many questions. There's been a torrent of questions over the last few months, and they just keep on getting larger and larger in scale. So we're going to have a regular segment where we try and respond to at least some of the more interesting questions. And to help me through that is my colleague, Alexandra Bush. G'day, Alex. Let's go.
Hello. Awesome. So we have a question from someone named Eli from Twitter. He is asking about whistleblowers and if you think someone will come forward to discuss reverse engineering programs.
That would certainly be my sincere hope. We're talking to people inside the legacy program. I've made no secret of that. It's a very, very delicate thing, just like it was for me dealing with Jake Barber. It's a very, very careful thing to talk to people inside a program that, frankly, the Pentagon denies exists. It's the most extraordinary situation to be talking to people. I had a conversation recently with somebody where I said, you apparently don't exist. The Pentagon denies that there is any knowledge of engagement with non-human intelligence. And the person I was talking to laughed. There are people who want to come forward. They're largely taking a long look at how the government responds, the new government under President Trump. Essentially, they're looking for a sign that the new president and his administration are going to be more amenable and open to taking whistleblowers seriously. And that's a delicate question at the moment. We're just waiting to see what happens with, say, Tulsi Gabbard in DNI, Nash Patel in FBI, and John Ratcliffe in CIA.
Wonderful. We have another question from a viewer on YouTube. They want to know how they can get directly involved in getting more information out, whether that is voting for representatives or if they're actually able to get involved in the Skywatchers.
One of the best groups that I've dealt with that's involved in efforts to lobby Congress is the Paradigm Research Network, which is run by Danny Sheehan out of Washington, D.C. They've got a website, and you can go to their website and you can help them through there. For Skywatcher's got a new website called skywatcher.ai, I think it is, and they actually invite people with skill sets to contact them. They're really interested in hearing from people with useful skills that might be able to assist them in doing the work that they're doing. And yes, I'm talking to Skywatcher about continuing to cover as a news story the efforts that they're making to get involved in both summoning and hopefully, incredibly, can't believe I'm saying this, retrieve a non-human craft.
We have Angela from Twitter. She wants to know your thoughts on Chris Bledsoe's story.
It's funny, I'm actually reading Chris Bledsoe's book at the moment, and I've been listening to both him and his son Ryan for quite a long time. It would certainly be a hope of mine one day to be able to interview Chris. I know that the different people from the Pentagon and NASA have taken a close interest in Chris's claims to essentially be engaging directly with the phenomenon. He sees everything through a very religious prism, which may or may not be correct. I simply don't know. But essentially, he claims to have seen visions of a feminine being, which he describes as Our Lady, as I understand it. And I think that's a reference to Mary, Mother Mary. Frankly, I'm just not in a position to make a judgment one way or the other about Chris Bledsoe. He's an area that I have never gone down and investigated, but yes, I'm taking an interest in considering interviewing him at some stage.
We have another viewer on YouTube. They said, quote, Ross, bravo. You have frightened me, excited me, and enlightened me. How has this impacted you personally?
Gee, I'd be really worried if I'd frightened you because, frankly, a lot of the message that I'm getting from people like Jake Barber and other people who've had a direct engagement with the phenomenon is that, in the main, it's largely not frightening, that in fact it's quite loving and quite desirous of engaging with humanity in a very positive way. But as I have said, yes, there is a malevolent and potentially bad side to some aspects of the phenomenon. I do intend continuing my research and watch this space.
Another question from YouTube. What do you know about Project Bluebeam?
One of the great conspiracy theories. And as we all know, some conspiracy theories turn out to be true. No, I'm not saying Project Bluebeam is the truth. I think there's a lot to be very skeptical about. It all goes back to a Canadian guy, I made a note of his name earlier, called Serge Monast. And back in the 1990s, he wrote a whole book about what he called Project Bluebeam, basically suggesting that NASA was involved in a dark conspiracy to essentially create holograms and technology in the skies that would give signals of a fake alien invasion, and that it was all about dark forces of control to push people away from Abrahamic religions and some kind of new world order. Suffice to say, a lot of people think that Serge Monast was a complete lunatic, and he died very shortly after he'd published his book. And it got picked up by, surprise, surprise, Alex Jones, the conspiracist podcaster in the United States. And it's also been given a run over the years, most notably, interestingly enough, by, I think, Roseanne Barr has been giving it a push along. And look, you can't dismiss it. There's long been theories and claims made by people that there is going to be a fake alien invasion as some kind of control mechanism by dark forces of the state. And that's a line pushed very much by a guy called Greer, Mr. Greer, Stephen Greer. Frankly, I'm skeptical. I don't see any evidence of such a conspiracy, and I noticed Mr. Greer recently has tried to include me in his conspiracy theories, suggesting that I'm colluding with Jake Barber in some kind of dark CIA false flag operation. I'm not buying into his theories. The simple fact is that there is a lot of speculation over the years about Project Bluebeam. It's floated around on conspiracy networks, and the recent drones flap was jumped upon by people as an example of a possible beginning of Project Bluebeam, because, of course, a lot of the drones were showing, how does one say this, changes in shape that are not consistent with normal drone technology. And the government's very quick attempt to try and ludicrously explain away the drones by saying they were part of some government research project has only added fuel to the fire of conspiracy theories. Because a lot of people are still seeing these drones. A lot of these drones are still showing themselves over government facilities, particularly military bases. And all it's doing, there's a lot said about conspiracy theories that they may not be true, but often the attempt to dismiss those conspiracy theories by either ignoring them, playing them down, or disinforming about them plays up to those conspiracy theories. And that's certainly what the government's doing at the moment. The absolutely ludicrous, laughable government response made by a White House press commentator who said that the drones flap that's occurred for the last few months was simply a government research project and also other reasons, unspecified reasons, is ridiculous. And all it's done, I think, is fuel public speculation of conspiracies like Project Bluebeam. Frankly, I don't think Project Bluebeam's true. I don't see any evidence at all, and I talk to a lot of people in NASA, that NASA could even possibly be involved in such a conspiracy. But I do think that it's not outside the realm of possibility, I suppose, that there are some forces in the dark state, the deep state, that might take it upon themselves to essentially do something with technology that they've been concealing from the American public. But I don't see any evidence of that at the moment.
Last time we did a Q&A, there was a lot of questions. Someone is asking about a location you spoke of. You said it was beautiful, there was people in a pool, lights in the sky. They want to know if you can let us know where the actual spot is and how we can get there.
It's a retreat called Esalen, Esalen. It's about 3.5 hours drive south of San Francisco on the west coast. It's a beautiful place. If anybody is ever driving down the coast there, they should really invite themselves in and use the bookshop and have a look around. It's a gorgeous location that's rented out by conferences and retreats. And I was lucky enough to go there as part of the Essia Explorers Club run by Alex Clokus, in which Jake Barber and I gave presentations to a lot of individuals who'd come from all over America and indeed all over the world, including scientists at the forefront of neuroscience and our understanding of the universe. And there was some amazing things demonstrated, including telepathic Indian children. And we also filmed and observed a summoning by one of the psionic operators who's working with Skywatcher. So Esalen, Esalen, is the retreat that I'm talking about.
Speaking of psionic, that takes us to the next question from YouTube. Someone wants to know if you think the ability is inborn or is it something that can be taught?
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I mean, some people have suggested to me that all humans once had this ability and that we've lost this capacity to essentially communicate with a higher consciousness as our spiritual ideas have diminished because we've become far more technological. And it's a tempting idea, this whole Gaia notion that the Earth is a living entity, a living consciousness, and that somehow humans can plug into a consciousness field spiritually through their brains. The interesting thing is that there is some scientific research being done, and if people have a look at some of the podcast episodes that I've done where I've interviewed people like Professor Gary Nolan, there is growing potential hypotheses that suggest that there are humans that have highly developed neurons at the base of their basal ganglia in their brain, the pudate putamen, or Kudabi putamen, I've never forgotten which way it goes. But essentially it's part of the brain where people who have, if you like, enhanced abilities like this, potentially a capacity to engage with the phenomenon, do appear to have more intense clusters of neurons in that part of the brain. But as I'm sure Gary would want me to emphasize, This is only a hypothesis at this stage, and it's still in the process of being assessed. I love the idea. I mean, I love the idea that human beings have got these innate abilities that they've somehow lost. Believe me, I've spent a lot of time through meditation and other techniques trying to develop any inherent ability that I might have to engage with the phenomenon, and I've so far failed miserably.
We have someone from YouTube is asking, what is happening at the USA Pine Gap base in Australia? Are they connected? And this is based off your last reality check episode.
Okay, so for people who don't know, there's a facility in Australia called the Joint Facility Pine Gap, and it's allegedly jointly operated by both the United States and Australia. Although I'm told by people who work there, who are Australian and indeed Americans, that there is a room that is only entered by Americans. It's a base that's been the subject of great controversy since it was built about, 40, 50 years ago. And it was originally built for the purpose of providing a secure location where the downlinks from satellites monitoring ballistic launches by Russia, China, and North Korea could be observed and downloaded to a land facility without them being intercepted by anyone. And the cool thing about Pine Gap is that it's in a location in the middle of central Australia near Alice Springs, near Uluru, otherwise known as Ayers Rock. And basically, if you're a Russian or a Chinese driving around in a car, you're very likely to be stopped because they're very, very strict and intense about security. I've made no secret of the fact that I have sources who've told me about Pine Gap, and they've told me that there have been anomalous phenomena filmed or videoed in and around that location and reported internally. It appears that because it's part of essentially America's strategic nuclear defense, it provides early warning of nuclear launches and ballistic launches. It's something that the phenomenon, whatever it is, has taken a close interest in. I've even had descriptions from people of orbs floating through the facility while security people are running around trying desperately to monitor and stop whatever it is. Is there something dark and evil going on at Pine Gap? I am assured by people who've actually been on inspections of Pine Gap officially for the American government that there are not subterranean facilities that are concealing some dark, evil program where we're colluding with aliens. But if anybody can provide me with such evidence, I'd be happy to see it.
We have another question from YouTube. This person is asking, why do you think NHI beings themselves are not making themselves known publicly?
That's a really good question, and I often ask myself that question as well. It could be that there's like a Star Trek style non-intervention order, essentially, what do they call it in Star Trek? The Prime Directive. And it's the idea that a primitive species like humanity has to be allowed to develop on its own, and that a superior, highly advanced species like aliens shouldn't try and interfere and meddle with that civilization. And Captain Kirk, of course, wrestled with such ideas all the time in Star Trek. And the interesting thing is, by the way, that Gene Roddenberry did have sources, allegedly, in the program who told him a little bit about this idea. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if there was a bit of seeding of Hollywood by people in the know. That's one possible explanation. It could very well be that there's an agreement between humans and non-humans about non-intervention. I just don't know. And it does puzzle me because obviously the best way of essentially waking human beings up to the reality of a non-human intelligence would be for them to park a flying saucer over a central park or over every major city in the world. But maybe what they're trying to do is avoid ontological shock. Maybe they're just gently letting us in very slowly. I just don't know. And it's something I think about often.
Ross, I wanted to ask you about a tweet that you posted. It is about a UFO disclosure themed film that is in the works. And you write here that David Grush is serving as a consultant on the film. Do you have any inside scoop you can tell us?
Yeah, I've known about this for a while, actually, and it's quite exciting. I'm a huge fan of Jerry Bruckheimer, the director. Who I think did Top Guns, and he's made a lot of the really cool movies, adventure action movies in the last few years. And I do know that David Grush has been working as a consultant for quite some time on this Jerry Bruckheimer movie. It's alien-themed, UFO-themed, and hopefully it's going to be exploring the crash retrieval allegations and reverse engineering allegations that are at the heart of the claims made by people like David Grush and Jake Barber. And I don't know, I'm not familiar with the script. I know that there are other movies in plan at the moment. I know Steven Spielberg's working on a movie as well. And don't forget as well, there's the very exciting Age of Disclosure Dan Farrar, Lua Elizondo documentary film, which is coming out, I think, in March.
Very cool. We definitely still have a lot of people asking about the drones in New Jersey and your take on everything that's going on with that, the FAA, all these plane crashes. Do you have any intel?
Yeah, I really want to say something about this, and I haven't been a shrinking violet in my criticism of the White House, the new Trump administration, for their absolutely lame explanation. I've forgotten the exact form of words, but there was a White House spokeswoman who came out and said at the very end of a press conference that the official explanation for the drones, which you might recall Donald Trump promised to get in the first few days of his new administration, they came back and they've reported that the drones seen over New Jersey, they didn't really respond to all of the drones seen all over the world, were FAA authorized research drones and other purposes. They were there also for other purposes. Now, this is a mystery that's been going on for months and months and months. There's been incursions over sensitive military facilities, Langley Air Force Base, Nellis Air Force Base, Air Force bases all over the world, RAF Lakenheath in the United Kingdom, places in Russia, China. This isn't just some FAA authorized research project. That is complete and utter BS, and I'm calling it out. I don't know why, and I'm quite depressed by the fact that the new White House, for all of its promises of transparency, has so clearly allowed itself to be egregiously misled by whoever gave them that ridiculous line. And I don't buy it. I don't accept that these drones are FAA authorized, not simply because that's contradicted by evidence that the FAA gave in December under oath to the Congress. There was an FAA official gave evidence under oath to the Congress in mid-December where they flatly testified that there was no authorization from the FAA for any such activity. There was no knowledge of any such drone activity. It totally contradicts the position that the White House has now said. And this is the thing, Alex, that I get really annoyed about as a journalist, that there's an opportunity here for the legacy media to actually start asking questions, because people like myself, a lot of the time reporters from NewsNation, we don't get invited to ask the key questions in the White House Oval Office of the President. You know, there's a very select group of journalists who are given such exclusive access, and frankly, they're not doing their job. This is a huge hole in public understanding of a major issue, a national security, flight safety issue that's been a major concern for months. And frankly, the media allowed it to be swept under the carpet by the White House after months and months and months of this mystery, which is still ongoing. And we still don't have a proper answer. And so I'm not buying the official explanation that this is somehow FAA authorized. If this is US technology, then it raises a whole lot of new questions, because a lot of these objects have been showing capabilities that are far beyond known prosaic terrestrially manufactured drones. If they are drones, they're very, very unusual drones.
All right, Ross. Well, I think you've answered all our questions for this week, but we are definitely going to come back and answer some more questions from viewers next week.
No problems at all. Good working with you, Alex. Hello and welcome to Reality Check. Before we start, I want to tell you a little bit about our sponsor for this week. It's the iconic Chuck Norris, a guy I used to have on my bedroom wall. The martial artist hero who's still in his 80s and still kicking butt and still staying active. What's even more shocking is he's stronger, he can work out longer, And he even has plenty of energy left over for his grandkids. He did this by making just one change, and he says he still feels like he's in his 50s. His wife even started doing this one thing too, and she's never felt better. She says she feels 10 years younger, her body looks leaner, and she has energy all day. Chuck made a special video that explains everything. Make sure you watch it by going to chuckdefense.com/Ross. That's this link below this video. It will change the way you think about your health. Once again, that's chuckdefense.com/Ross. Now, let's get on and enjoy the show.
For too long, the American spirit has been dimmed by a veil of secrecy, by a government that has grown too comfortable in the shadows, denying us the transparency we deserve. But today, we stand at the dawn of a new era where the light of truth begins to shine through. A few weeks ago, President Donald Trump made a historic announcement. With the stroke of a pen, he committed to declassifying the files concerning the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. A decision not just monumental, but pivotal. It is with profound honor that I have been entrusted by Speaker Mike Johnson and Chairman James Comer to lead the House Oversight Task Force on Declassification of Federal Secrets. This will no longer be a task force that makes bold promises only to fade into irrelevance or send strongly worded letters. This will be a relentless pursuit of truth and transparency, and we will not stop until the American people have the answers they deserve. We will be conducting investigations into the following: the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Dr. Martin Luther King, unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as UAPs, unidentified submerged objects, also known as USOs, the Epstein client list, the origins of COVID-19, and the 9/11 files. Our first investigation will be announced, but it's going to be covering on a thorough investigation into the John F. Kennedy assassination. And I can tell you, based on what I've been seeing so far, the initial hearing that was actually held here in Congress was actually faulty in the single bullet theory. I believe that there were two shooters, and we should be finding more information as we are able to gain access into the SCIF, hopefully before the files are actually released to the public. The biggest information problems that we've had with UAPs is the amount of stonewalling, stovepiping, and also it seems that there is this push to gaslight the American people into looking at the evidence and then not fully believing it. Why is it that members of Congress who are given a top secret security clearance are being denied access?
G'day and welcome back to Reality Check. I'm Ross Coulthart, and today we're interviewing Matthew Pines, who's just taken on the role as Executive Director of a DC-based think tank called the Bitcoin Policy Institute, which is a non-profit that explores and researches the policy and societal implications of Bitcoin and cyber currency. But of course, that's not why we've brought him here today. In previous roles, he's advised the US government on national preparedness and emerging technology, and he's also served as Director of Intelligence for a geopolitical and cyber security consultancy. Matthew studied physics and philosophy at Johns Hopkins University and went on to earn a master's degree with distinction from the London School of Economics. He's also been conspicuous in his commentary and analysis on the emerging UAP mystery. Is there a cover-up? And in that capacity, he's taken on a role as a strategic advisor for Alex Klokus's Enia Explorers Club, which includes Jake Barber's Skywatcher operation. And incredible as it may sound to the people that Matthew probably normally advises, Skywatcher has at its heart allegations that a cadre of people inside the US government and private aerospace have secretly colluded to conceal the recovery of non-human technology, alien craft, from public knowledge. Skywatcher is an independent, private equity-funded initiative that intends to prove something the Pentagon categorically denies, that there is evidence of non-human intelligence engaging with this planet, and that alien tech really has been and can be recovered and hopefully reverse engineered, this time by good old-fashioned capitalistic private enterprise through Skywatcher rather than the dark forces of the so-called deep state. Matthew Pines, I have to say, firstly, welcome to Reality Check. And isn't covering UAPs one hell of a pivot from what you normally do in the sober world of national security?
Well, first off, thank you, Ross. I've admired your work and I appreciate you bringing me on to your show. It may seem like that, but my through line throughout my sort of academic and professional career has always been thinking about one frontier subjects. When I was a young lad, I thought I was going to get a PhD in physics, maybe even a PhD in philosophy at the same time. So I was always interested in these more foundational and kind of frontier questions, and then embarked on a career in national security where a lot of the analysis and work I did was focused on these what if questions. Like, what if there is a improvised nuclear device sort of terrorist attack? What if there is full-on nuclear war? What if there are crippling cyber attacks? What if you have global pandemics? These sort of low probability, high consequence events are things the government has to plan and prepare for. And so I did a lot of analysis exercises, operational experimentation to try to sketch out what that scenarios what those scenarios might look like. And so UAPs, right, as sort of fantastical they are, they sort of represent maybe the most high consequence and maybe prima facie low probability scenario, but which would have significant implications. And so even if you think it's unlikely, you have to take it seriously if there are credible indications as came to the fore over the past number of years that this is a scenario that can't just be dismissed. And so then wearing my normal sort of analytic national security hat on, this is a what if scenario that had to be addressed very seriously. And I think it's only become more pressing over the years.
I noticed, Matthew, that just a few days ago you tweeted the answers to questions that Lou Elizondo, a former senior Pentagon UAP investigator, answered back to the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability in the House of Reps. And I thought it was actually quite an important series of answers to the questions. Lou was basically asked by the committee, does any branch of the US government or defence contractors, aerospace and otherwise, possess technology derived from a non-human source? And Lou's always, he's a bit of a tease. He sort of sometimes swallows his words slightly and he's very careful. But this time he said quite definitively, ATIP engaged senior executives at DoD defence aerospace companies who claimed they possessed recovered exotic material not made by any US or foreign source. Because these executives indicated they could no longer glean additional insight from such material, they initially agreed to allow ATIP ORSAP to take control of the material. And he went on to talk about James Lakatsky, the former director of the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program, ORSAP, which basically talked about how there was an allocation of money for Defence Intelligence Agency, ORSAP, to go to a skiff at Bigelow Aerospace due to a UAP material divestment plan proposed by Lockheed Martin Space Systems. Now, it doesn't get much blunter than that. That's pretty categorical, isn't it?
Yes, and I think it's an indication of where we are and kind of this divergence between the high fidelity alleged facts that paint a pretty stark picture of the reality of these retrieval programs, the reality of kind of the bureaucratic apparatus that has been constructed around them, and sort of the recent history of kind of evolution of that set of programs, and what you would call kind of the mainstream national security reporting community that doesn't seem to have picked up on that fact.
Who do you believe, Matthew? And I'm asking you for your personal opinion. Who's right and who's wrong? Is there an egregious cover-up going on inside what Donald Trump refers to as the deep state, concealing the existence of recovered non-human technology? What's your position?
I think it is very likely that we have recovered technologies of unknown origin as referenced in the UAP Disclosure Act, and that technologies of unknown origin refers to technologies that can't be associated with a known means of human manufacture, and that we've sort of prosaically termed non-human intelligence as the standard origin. I believe that is likely the case.
If a man of your undoubted intelligence and capabilities comes to that conclusion based on the available evidence, what the hell's going on in Congress? Because this is really what I'm interested in getting from you, is you've worked in Congress. I noticed that you've got on your CV, you've worked for a congressman yourself. What's going on in the House? Because they're pretty junior people on this Nancy Mace, I beg your pardon, on this Anna Paulina Luna committee that's doing the task force into UAPs. Are we really going to see any moving of the needle with this committee that's been set up to investigate UAPs?
I'm cautiously optimistic. I think in our modern American political environment, there's always a mix between the show, right? Things done for sort of mimetic intention to sort of draw attention and improve kind of the personal status of these individuals. And most individuals in American politics, fundamentally, they have to be celebrities to be reelected. And there's a lot of attention there's a lot of motivation that is about attracting attention and trying to carve out a niche, right? So that's just a fundamental dynamic in American politics at the moment. And I think there's a number of these individuals that have sort of seized on this topic as, their cause celeb. Now, that means there's always two levels going on. There's kind of what you would call more the trivial level, the level of social media, of attention grabbing announcements and, kind of somewhat hyperbolic claims, maybe even hyperpartisan claims. And then there's the second level, which is the structural level, which is this is a task force that's, duly convened as part of the House Oversight Committee. The chairman of that committee has said that he'll, support subpoenas if necessary, and that the subjects of their investigations are not just UAPs, but sort of a whole litany of kind of legacy historical, discussions around, fraud issues, right? JFK, COVID origins, et cetera. Now, one critical dynamic is that these are the same party as the party in power, and the new officials that have been appointed and nominated to serve as, cabinet secretaries overseeing these different bureaucracies will be the subjects of subpoenas, nominally from members of their own party on the Hill. And usually that's not the way things work, right? Usually there's a level of comedy and deference and sort of cooperation behind the scenes. So one way this could work, this could play out essentially these meetings, these hearings, and maybe documents that ultimately get produced are sort of provided voluntarily by the responsible agencies, and it's just a means of essentially front dooring or front facing material that they maybe would have otherwise a difficult issue kind of issuing themselves, right? And this is a convenient kind of bounce pass for some information.
Okay, Matthew, I'm going to promote you. I mean, you're an expert in national security and emerging technologies, and I've decided as the new president to appoint you as the National Security Advisor. And on the very first day that you get into the job at the National Security Council, a chap in uniform comes in, sits you down, and gives you the briefing on the legacy program. And he leans across, fixes eyes with you, and he says, "Sir, this is an incredibly sensitive national security secret. We have technology, we have weaponry, propulsion systems, energy systems that, yes, we have probably illegally kept from the knowledge of the Congress and indeed from the knowledge of previous presidents. But I appeal to you, sir, as the new National Security Advisor, to think very carefully about what you do now." What are you going to do, Matthew? What are you going to do? And I suspect that's happening in the White House right now. I suspect there's a decision being made. I'm told that the block is happening at presidential level, that previous presidents haven't been briefed, and that the approaches have been made by the Pentagon at National Security Council level. What are you going to do as a new National Security Council head, making that decision? What should we be taking into account?
Well, my first question is, how can you ensure that it won't come out in any other way? In which case, I'm facing a much bigger problem, right? Because if you can truly constrain the option set for me, which is either stays in the box like it has been for 80 years, and we can maintain unparalleled, strategic overmatch over our rivals while, keeping a fundamental asymmetry of knowledge with respect to society and a democracy that we would maybe feel uncomfortable with, but fundamentally it's sustainable. The question, if I'm not security advisor...
Whoa, I'm not letting you to get away with that one. So as the new National Security Advisor, you would heed, if you could get away with it, you would heed the request for secrecy. You would defer to secrecy rather than openness in the interests of protecting these technologies.
Well, so I'm trying to mentally model, like, say, Waltz, right, as national security advisor. And I know the questions he would ask is like, this is a false dichotomy, right? Usually when you're being briefed up by your underlings who are telling you, like, usually, they're framing an issue to try to box you into a certain option. And your role as a principal is to sort of challenge that false dichotomy, look for and make sure that there are all these options, being recommended to you that represent, the full spectrum, that you're not being sort of given a false choice. And so that's what I would do, right? Is sort of respond in kind to sort of break that false choice. Because I think ultimately you have, two equivalent responsibilities in that position. You have a responsibility to protect America, to protect its population, to ensure that it has a strategic advantage over its rivals in a highly contested world. And we believe our system of government, while flawed, is ultimately superior to many, if not most others. But on the other hand, you live in a democracy. And democracies fundamentally are only legitimate if they're accountable to the people, right? And there are certain secrets that are prudently and lawfully and ethically kept in the interest of national security. And there's certain information that's not inherently government information. The government has no legal or ethical or legitimate right to keep secret. And say the fact of non-human intelligence, I would hold, is not government information. It's not something the government can legal or ethically withhold. So I would want to make sure I'm cleanly dividing the sets of information here into buckets that are prudently kept classified and buckets that are morally and ethically, obligatory to disclose.
So if you as a national security advisor were briefed into the fact that NHI, non-human intelligences, have been engaging with planet Earth for however long, be it 80 years or millennia, would you accept the argument that's, I'm told, often made from within that national security establishment, that it's a slippery slope, that to reveal engagement by NHI with this planet is to also lead to the inevitable disclosure of technologies and weapon systems and energy systems that we would rather not disclose? Do you see it as an inevitable slippery slope?
I don't, but I would need to be convinced, right? Like, I don't see, like, the fact that, for example, right now, I've updated my beliefs on the fact that non-human intelligence is real and that technologies of unknown origin that manifest knowledge of physics and, therefore associated understanding of the nature of reality that is radically different than the sort of current theoretical frameworks that govern academic physics. But I don't know how to build those craft, right? So I have now reconciled my personal beliefs that there is a reality of non-human intelligence, and I think there's zero proliferation risk that is now generated as a result of me acquiring that knowledge. And I don't see how that doesn't play out at scale, right? Now, of course, over the long term, the world is the world is, right? And human science and knowledge ultimately seeks out and exploits the degrees of freedom that are available to us. That's what we call physics and science and technology. And so if the world just, allows a certain capability, it will be created eventually. And the role of government is to ensure that the technology is, harnessed for the advancement and security of all of our people. And I think, this is where it's a more philosophical question. Is there black balls in the big jar of knowledge? And if you pull out a black ball, is that inherently, dangerous knowledge? Is there such a thing as dangerous knowledge? I agree there is such a thing as dangerous knowledge, but that doesn't mean you never take your hand out of the jar, right? You go to, a sort of a Kaczynski approach to technology where we should all just be living in the forest. I don't think that's the right approach, but I think it's a false choice, right? I think we just need to break these false choices.
What do you think of the current National Security Advisor? Is he susceptible to the kind of pressure that we're talking about here, that the Pentagon might basically say, look, you're going to jeopardize an 80-year-old technological superiority that we've developed by revealing this? It would be irresponsible for the new president to even whisper of disclosure.
Well, I don't know exactly how he would respond. I think he's a former soldier. He has an intelligence background. He's a congressman. He's obviously made remarks about David Grush, taking him very seriously, taking this topic very seriously. I think he's also very sensitive to this idea of illegal, unreported, unaccountable programs, right? And this is very much a policy priority of the Trump administration, is to ensure accountability in the federal government to the rightfully appointed constitutional officers. So I think he would look askance at any claim that says, no, you can keep your special privileges and your autonomy. Now, there's a question of what would be disclosed. I think there's two big questions here. One is problem of accountability and a problem of disclosure. I think that the priority of the Congress and the administration coming in is to first establish better accountability over these programs and these activities to ensure they're properly briefed and they understand the ground truth, that there isn't these unreported, somewhat rogue programs that feel like they don't have an obligation to report and take direction from the commander in chief and to have oversight by the Congress. So that's like problem one, because you can't have disclosure without having accountability, right? You need to have the constitutional structures perform as designed by the framers. Then step two is, given sufficient briefings and establishment of accountability, full-throated, no holds barred, then I have to trust, right, our constitutional leadership to make the right decision on our behalf, right? But this is where the role of, well-motivated and proper whistleblower protections can kind of hold those folks accountable. And this is not just relying on one person to make the right decision, but relying on a constitutional process that's well-functioning and having a balance of power, right? Ideally doesn't lead to that sort of single point of failure. But this is not like a simple answer where it's just rip the Band-Aid off and everything gets dumped out. And I would want to know, the assessment is, how close is China, right? You say there's an unparalleled advantage that we need to protect. Well, is the current arrangement that has been established for 80 years actually leading to a strategic disadvantage? Because the way these programs have been compartmented, the way that the secrecy has been organized, and the fact that we can't get the best and brightest involved has meant that China's been able to catch up, maybe surpass us. And so this is an argument that is actually self-defeating for national security to kind of keep this behind the curtain.
You're now a strategic advisor, of course, for the NER Explorers Club and Skywatcher. And the implications of that are that if Jake Barber's predictions do turn out to be true, it's entirely plausible, according to Jake, that he and his team will be able to summon and convincingly obtain proof of a non-human technology, possibly even within months. Do you agree?
I mean, these folks, if there's any group of people that I know of that can make that claim and not be laughed out of a room, it's these folks, right? And so I take their claims and their professional bona fides and their organization and their good faith efforts very seriously. It's why I've decided to advise them, because I think it's highly significant and unique, the effort that they're about to undertake, and it's fraught, right, with all these larger implications. And I think they want to and they are going about it in a diligent fashion. And this is ultimately what it comes down to, is you can either impress upon the government and work through these processes to try to get information released over time and, going through all the different bureaucratic and political filters, or you can just recognize, well, if there are non-human intelligence operating in our area, if they are susceptible to various means of interrogation and engagement, the skies aren't classified, right? Those means and methods aren't classified. The skills and capabilities of these people are now in the private domain. This is a straight path to bring information, high quality, high fidelity, censored data, including maybe material information, to civil society, to academic institutions, in a fashion that sort of bypasses these bureaucratic procedures and these political procedures in DC. And that's ultimately, just a parallel path I think that should be explored.
So let's talk about that hypothetical possibility. Let's assume Jake and his team and Alex, with the private equity investment that he's got, they manage to actually retrieve one of these craft. What happens in the White House at that moment? I mean, essentially it's wrong footing the Defense Department and whoever it is in private aerospace that's covering this up, isn't it?
Well, it's hard to think through all the different details of that hypothetical. I do think that the Skywatcher team wants to be responsible in this and doesn't want to just create a whole scene for the sake of it, right? They want to do this in a responsible fashion. And I think there are folks in the government not associated with the legacy program that, feel the same way, right, about the activities that have been conducted where they were not properly read in, and that they feel that this is an interest of national security and it falls within their broader purview. And I think this is an opportunity to kind of, again, you can look back and there might be, a need for recriminations and criminal punishments and investigations on wrongdoing. But there's a separate path, which is, okay, like the government still exists and there are good people in different parts of the government that we need to help engage, civil society and basically do this the right way going forward, right? And so this is not about just doing it all, out in the wilderness, right, on your own, but about essentially, stimulating and catalyzing the government to do what maybe they can't already do, and then finding new methods of, say, new institutions or public-private partnerships or structures where more collaboration and access to these materials can be facilitated by research partnerships, et cetera. To kind of, this is a much larger question than just any Skywatcher question. This truly requires building new institutions, new collaborations, new structures. And I think the government, we want the government to play a role in that. We want different, levels of government to play a role in that. That's a bigger project, but I think you need to sort of start small. And, this idea of making it plausible, right, as a first question, which was, probably prima facie very implausible until the Skywatcher folks came out, that it is conceivable to get, such materials without, getting it divested, say, from Lockheed. Well, that's still trickling out, and I think we wait to see, what that's going to trigger in terms of other new organizations and new efforts, and how the different parts of the government respond to those movements. And I think this is just the very beginning stages of that dynamic.
What do you think is the reason for the cover-up?
I mean, I guess the question assumes there's one. I think there's probably many layers of this. You could say that back in the 40s and 50s, this was tucked under, right, the Atomic Energy Act, secrecy provisions, and it was seen essentially as a potentially destabilizing, force for basic, social structures, which at that time were seen as, very hierarchical, right? The state was very powerful and strong. The institutions that managed this information were actually highly capable and technocratic, and also aligned with kind of the democratic state in the post-war environment. And I think everyone accepted that was a prudent, kind of legitimate thing to do, right? Especially in the Cold War era. And then you had, I think, an evolution and maybe a decay, maybe a structural institutional decay of those programs as sort of things became fragmented and sort of hyper competitive, almost privatized, right? And you got, that then generated an environment where maybe much less ethical, much less democratically accountable activities took off. And those never got reined in. And so they just compounded and pathologized like a cancer. They sort of grow until they kill the patient. In this case, maybe democratic oversight. And I think that's now, it's a irreversible process in terms of a certain institution. It gets to a state like that, and it's hard to come back. It's hard to sort of admit, right, that things went really wrong. And so just the inertia of let's just try to keep going and kick the can. And I don't want to get, the tail pinned on my particular donkey. I don't want to have to be hauled before Congress and explain all these things. I think that's like a narrow, parochial kind of human narrative, but I think it's also self-justified by, what might be motivated reasoning, but also might be well motivated in terms of a sense of caution about the disruption that could happen to society, to religion, to our economic and geopolitical order, and that this needs to be prepared and, slowly diffused into social consciousness over many decades through, say, different media formats and sort of cultural management, and that when the time is right, that the runway will have been foamed and we can sort of roll this out. I don't know how much I buy into that as a prudent motivation, but I think it's a mix of parochial self, CYA, as we call it in America, as well as maybe, earnest uncertainty about the risks associated with disclosure.
Let's roll back 62 years to JFK. It's quite clear whether UAPs had anything at all to do with JFK's murder or not. It's quite clear that JFK was interested in the UFO issue, mainly because of interdiction issues. He was trying to make sure that there was no possibility that UFOs could be confused for either a Soviet attack or an American attack and lead to an unnecessary nuclear exchange. There's a lot of talk that the president at the time was instructing the CIA to essentially move on this issue and become more open with the Soviets. And that, if I'm told correctly, that's the origin story for why many presidents have been kept in the dark about this. And is there any legitimate basis you could think of for why the commanders-in-chief of the United States Defense Force, the president, have been not read in as a matter of course to these programs? I mean, I know they haven't been in many cases. There have been presidents who've sought and been refused access to information about the program. Is there any justification on any kind of national security or imperative technology primacy basis that you can think of that would give the faceless bureaucrats and presumably private aerospace wonks that have made these decisions justification for such a decision?
Not if you believe in our Constitution, right? If you don't believe the Constitution holds, that gives, the executive, all powers over the executive branch and unilateral authority to classify or declassify any government information. If you believe that the Constitution is just irrelevant, well, then, yeah, you can do whatever you want. But if you believe that and you are serving in the military or you're in a position of government responsibility, you're effectively abrogating your fundamental duty to the Constitution. So I don't see how any justified argument. I could see lots of self-motivated, somewhat cynical arguments could be given, but I can't see a politically or legitimate argument given.
Let's pick a name. Oh, Curtis LeMay. Let's pick Curtis LeMay, for example, and suggest that perhaps he was one of the people involved in making the decision, maybe with, say, Alan Dulles, then director of the CIA. Isn't it a good argument, frankly, Matthew? We know how much Congress leaks. We know how much congressmen and senators love having a quiet chat over a beer with a journalist. Wouldn't this have leaked if Congress had been read into the program? Isn't there a good argument that this ought, whilst there is an argument that it ought properly, constitutionally, to have been revealed to the Congress and to the President? The simple fact is that in reality it's been too big a secret to not conceal.
So it's funny, right? So the executive branch during World War II was systematically compromised at the highest levels and the deepest levels, to the point where Stalin knew more about the Manhattan Project than Vice President Truman did. They had spies and moles throughout the executive branch, the sort of, quote, hermetically sealed compartments that folks like LeMay felt they had, sole dominion over. And so there's the government, especially the executive branch, the intelligence community, they love to think they're really good at keeping secrets. And time after time tells us we're really not, right? But the architecture of secrecy is not to first order about keeping secrets, right? It's about bureaucratic control over information, right? Because we know and we operate sort of on the assumption that a lot of our information after a certain period of time is going to be known to the adversary. We just bake that in to our assumptions. And we know, especially if there's fundamental science knowledge, it's hard to keep that from a sophisticated adversary that has their own independent technological and scientific development and ecosystems. Like, there are special advantages you want to try to keep, little tips and tricks that you want to keep. Sources and methods are obviously critical to national security. We protect those, but we operate on the assumption that there are spies in our midst, right? And when you compartmentalize a program, you have to account for these different risks. And so, yeah, the Gang of Eight, right, is the proper oversight body for these sorts of secrets. But I don't see any argument to be made that the Gang of Eight is more likely to leak than, a deputy for Strategic Air Command, right? These are human beings. They take the same oaths. They're subject to the same human frailties, right? Money, ideology, compromise, ego. This is how intelligence services recruit. And so every service has to approach these things with a balance of risks to manage.
Okay, I accept all that, Matthew, but this is the thing I wrestle with the most when I'm looking at this issue. Journalists have this assumption, sooner or later, everything leaks. Politicians can't help themselves. They're total gossips. Okay, so let's assume a decision was made by people in the national security establishment at a very high level, and people colluded in private aerospace to keep it secret. They must know that at some stage it's going to leak. I mean, what's the rationale if they knew that? Why have they persisted with this cover-up?
Well, leaking information doesn't necessarily mean programs are compromised, right? Those are sometimes very different things. And you can mitigate leak of information through selective disinformation programs, right? That's, I think, been the main strategy, right? Like, information often does leak out of highly classified programs, but you can mitigate the impact by a successful disinformation effort. And so
that might explain things like MJ12, which does appear to have some legitimacy, but there is some apparent disinformation within that.
Yeah, and I think that's every program has to have that built in, right? You never assume everything's going to stay inside the box. You have to assume some information could get outside the box. And then your plan is how you staunch the bleeding, right? How you mitigate the impact of information leaking. And a lot of counterintelligence activities and intelligence activities is often trying to suss out from an adversary doing the same thing to you, what leaks are legitimate leaks, what leaks are sort of intentional misinformation from an adversary service that wants to feed you something, right, to confuse you. And I think we have been in this sub rosa Cold War with our principal geopolitical rivals, Russia and then now China on this subject, and we've been engaged in this sort of multi-party intelligence and counterintelligence activity on these programs. I think that's what motivates to first order the security organizations that protect this information is not congressional reporting, which is like 5 layers above their head. It's Chinese spies trying to get in. And I think they've been very successful, unfortunately.
But I'll tell you that the biggest thing I get from people who speak to me and who convincingly assert that they're working within this legacy UAP reverse engineering program, the biggest concern that I get from them is that the very secrecy, the very compartmentalization that's imposed on them as scientists and people investigating the phenomenon is actually confounding our ability to develop advantages in technology and materials science that might give us the edge over our foreign rivals, whereas at the same time, apparently, China is moving ahead with leaps and bounds.
I think it's a very fair assessment. I have the same concern. I've in my last role, which I just departed, had spent 4 years essentially advising multinationals and critical technology companies on essentially, to first order China trying to hack them or otherwise access their proprietary information. And it's gotten to the point where China doesn't necessarily need to steal a whole lot because they're actually out front of many of our leading technology companies. I mean, there's certain fields where we have an advantage, but China is extremely capable at pushing the frontier along a lot of these relevant dimensions, whether it's material science, quantum information sciences, and related quantum sort of technology applications, space, new energy. They are extremely capable. And if you wedded that strong S&T capability and massive R&D pipeline coming out of the universities into a military system that has civil military fusion, where there's no such thing as really like a private tech company or a private R&D enterprise. Ultimately, the state can subsume your activities.
So the implications of this, I just want to emphasize this for our audience because it's a complex idea, but essentially the idea is that the very secrecy that's been imposed on this alleged UAP reverse engineering program, a secret attempt by the US government and private aerospace to reverse engineer non-human technology and give America a strategic advantage against its potential foreign rivals, that whole idea is potentially being undermined by that secrecy. Whereas at the same time, the countries in which we're involved, is, according to David Grush, in a secret sub-rosa Cold War for the development of these technologies, they've got authoritarian governments. They can repress people and intimidate scientists all they want to achieve the results that they want to achieve. We're actually undermining our ability to secure a strategic advantage.
Yeah, and even the Senate put this in writing, and the sort of front matter for one of the recent bills. They said, in order to mitigate the possibility of foreign technology surprise, the federal government must broaden awareness of historic exotic technology antecedents previously provided by the federal government for research and development purposes, which kind of tells the whole thing. It means in order to mitigate the possibility of China getting the jump on us, the federal government must broaden awareness of these historical exotic technology antecedents that we had previously provided for R&D purposes. And that is now not sufficient.
So we've got that point emphasized now. That being the case, my concern about the task force, the UAP task force that has been set up by Congresswoman Anna Portolina Luna, is they're good people, they're well-motivated people, and they're on both sides of politics, but they're fairly junior level members in the House. They're not heads of committees. James Comer, for example, has conspicuously not put himself onto that task force subcommittee, if you like. Mm-hmm. You know, where's Marco Rubio on this? Where are all the people who've previously basically made it clear that they've taken a position on the UAP issue? Why are they so quiet right now? Why hasn't Trump said anything more overtly?
So this is where I put my other different hats on that I've worn. One is like the geopolitical risk analyst. The other is as a student of the global economic system and sort of the power structures that govern our world and the global order that has evolved over the past decades. And you have to think about the national strategic policy decision calculus around UAP disclosure, not on its own, individual terms, but in this larger strategic and global context. And that's where you think about a lot of things that are happening that are quite significant and strategic in terms of the global chessboard, right? Trump, aggressively and somewhat to the dismay of the Europeans, pushing for a ceasefire deal in Ukraine, sort of snuffing out the flames of conflict in Europe, making pretty just dramatic, moves, and then getting most of the Middle East to come along for a resolution of the Israel-Gaza conflict. And then even suggestions to China and Russia mutually that we should reduce our defense expenditures by 50% and maybe even embark on a program of denuclearization. Meanwhile, Rubio is sent as his principal, avatar to go negotiate these deals. And I look at that and I look at this is obviously a massive geopolitical shift in terms of U.S. foreign policy. But I also have to consider the UAP topic, and Rubio knows what he knows, and you know what Rubio knows, right? So he's going into these meetings with Lavrov, and future meetings with world leaders, and they know what he knows about this subject. So this is not some side question on some podcasts. This is, lurking, maybe even explicitly in side conversations between national leaders and their foreign emissaries. And this is where the discussion around disclosure fundamentally is a global discussion, right? It's about, what this means for these larger questions about the systems of government and the foreign relations that, we want to try to keep stable.
Is there any doubt in your mind that the Russians and the Chinese know full well that there is a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet?
No, they know just as much as we know. And that's the unfortunate part.
Why would they collude then with the United States and keeping it secret? I mean, if you were Putin, if you wanted to sort of embarrass the government of the United States, wouldn't one of the best ways to do that be to say, listen, you guys are always accusing me of being the authoritarian, but it's your country that's suppressing evidence of a non-human intelligence. Why wouldn't the Russians disclose?
I think it's been a complicated game theory that has maybe kept that sort of suppressed in a mutually reinforcing, somewhat stable equilibrium, right? Where everyone had an interest in trying to keep it secret from their own public, right? Because there could be second order effects that would destabilize their regime stability, as well as, you want to try to keep enough of your knowledge close to the chest. You know that the other guy knows something about it, but you don't really know exactly how much they figured out either about the technology, the origin, or these other interrelated phenomena. And so you do sort of a double game, right? You want to try to cooperate to the extent that you can want to glean some information of your adversary. How much do they know, right? What do they know that I don't know? So you want to cooperate because there's an exogenous variable here that neither of you potentially perfectly model. So other people's information is very valuable to you, but you don't want to, reveal all the things you've got. So this is a complicated dynamic that maybe kept a lid on sort of public disclosure. But maybe we might be shifting to a new regime where that dynamic could shift. And there has been concern. I know it's been voiced to me in different settings that, maybe not Russia, but China, for example, feels like they have, gotten enough of knowledge around the subject that this would be in line with their strategic communications and sort of global propaganda goals, right? That they can sort of come out and say, blame the sort of imperial West for holding the secret illegally and morally from the world in order to exploit it for, material and military advantage. Meanwhile, we, who just recently come into this knowledge, we have studied it. Our best scientists have, looked into this subject, and we want to bring this knowledge to the world. And we want to then also use the fruits of our R&D to bring the gifts of the technology that could be generated and share those with the world, right? It would be a massive propaganda victory, right, for their whole sort of shared.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so sort of shared future for mankind, a kind of a common destiny sorts of sort of verbiage that they've been propagating. So this is a massive risk. This is why the disclosure conversation isn't just the U.S. one, right? There's a dynamic here of it was maybe a stable equilibrium that kept it somewhat under wraps, especially when it was just U.S. and Russia. Now there's a new party, and they've caught up, and they have a much larger ambition. And maybe they're not as worried about the domestic or destabilizing effects in their own society, maybe because of different metaphysical basis in their belief system, or other considerations. So this is a new regime we could be entering into.
Separately from the allegations of David Grush, Lou Elizondo, all the known people, Jake Barber, Have you, in your time trawling the halls of power, chatting quietly with senators and congresspeople, have you ever heard the whispers that there is this program in operation, this reverse engineering program with retrieved non-human technology?
I mean, I've heard, again, it's like there's an elephant and you touch a tail, you touch a toe, you touch a tusk, and you're like, I think this is an elephant, but nobody comes out and says it's an elephant, right? It's a very unusual tusk. It's a very unusual tail, right? So there's obviously individuals that are in the public domain, the folks that have come out, spoken at Soul Foundation, that have made the clear and declarative, allegation of these programs, and those folks have the bona fides, and I'm very confident in the quality and the source of their assertions. But it also comports with other information that I've gleaned in various more snippets, right, of that elephant that generally paint this mosaic of, yes, like these are longstanding, I think somewhat fragmented, compartmentalized programs that exist across a smattering of different defense primes, and then are custodied in a variety of different locations. And this is an active program at scale that's been long running.
One thing that I was told by a very good source was that Israel is much more intimately involved in the legacy program than has previously been disclosed to date. Have you ever heard any intimations of the Israelis being involved?
I mean, well, there's the famous, sort of Haim Ashed book where he alleges that. I haven't heard anything firsthand about that. I strongly suspect it. And recently, I was in a conversation with, and this is recorded, so it'll be public, that will basically describe kind of someone very connected to Israel, talking about the subject. And it relates, in general to, what we think about, the Israeli military complex and how close it was to the U.S. Complex. And, we have embarked on kind of a sensitive relationship with Israel over the years, right? Like we have very sensitive technology transfer programs with them. They also have very sensitive technology transfer programs with us because they often have breakthroughs that we don't get because they're extremely good. But of course, they live in a much more volatile environment, right? So they would have an acute interest in, operationalizing some capabilities that maybe we would much more like to hold back, right? For say a really covert ISR thing. So there's an inherent risk associated with, Israel's programs, like leading to disclosure of some advancements, because their threshold for operational deployment is going to be much, say, lower than ours, right? But no, I strongly suspect that most governments of some advancement, essentially, I expect that almost every government that has a nuclear program probably has something like a UAP program, at different stages of maturity and understanding. But I don't think it's actually like that much of a there's that much of a monopoly, around the great powers.
I spent a lot of time looking at the extraordinary claims made by, of all people, rock star Tom DeLonge. And I actually think Tom's telling a very true story, that essentially in the years prior to the Hillary Clinton-Donald Trump first election campaign challenge, there was a decision made by people in the Defense Department and private aerospace that they'd better get out on the front foot. And they were preparing for disclosure. And that as much as revealed in the WikiLeaks document that clearly show that Clinton's campaign advisor, John Podesta, who was obviously at senior levels in both Bill Clinton's White House and Barack Obama's White House, he was heavily involved in conversations with a very senior executive from Lockheed Martin, with people, General Neil McCaslin from the US Air Force, General Michael Carey from the US Air Force, and there appeared to be some kind of strategic planning for what was essentially seen as a likely Hillary Clinton victory, the possibility or the probability that there was going to be a disclosure president pushing for disclosure. Do you agree with that analysis? Do you think that we came very close in 2017 to a possible disclosure presidency that was confounded by Donald Trump winning in 2017?
Yes, no, I would concur with your assessment. And I would even connect it to something Jake Barber mentioned. I think it was in Jesse Michaels' interview, where he described, maybe with speculation on his part, about the origin of the program that he was sort of recruited into as being, created at the behest of President Clinton. And my sort of interpolation of that, this is me sort of speculating on top of that, is that if President Clinton had come into office with some broad but very much vague awareness of these programs and wanted to get to the bottom of it, and tasks his senior advisors to go out and say, I'm the president, this is, what president, this is what I want to know, and he gets the stiff arm, well, he would be concerned, right, that there's a rogue programs out there. Well, then you might want to be like, well, what can I do as president? I can just meekly accept that, or you can create your own secret programs off the books to try to get the read on what these other secret programs that they're not telling you about are doing. And this is like, it sounds somewhat, exaggerated, but it's kind of what you would expect bureaucratically, right? Is just you just sign a memo, and now you've got a whole new secret program that just reports to you. And presidents, that's like one of the special things you can do as president. And that sort of would involve this process of kind of slow infiltration, if not collaboration, and kind of a very complicated kind of bureaucratic evolution from there. But it would be a response that I would have as president if I had high confidence that these programs existed, to like get some of my own intelligence on maybe what parts of my apparatus are doing without my knowledge, and that maybe have collected information that led ultimately to the part 2.
But the corollary to what we're talking about here is that clearly when Donald Trump did become president in defiance of what was being predicted, it was a huge upset even to the mainstream media. It's quite clear a decision was made inside the national security establishment to not disclose that President Trump wasn't a disclosure president. Has anything changed? I mean, Trump's a very transactional person. What's in it for Trump to disclose?
Well, this is where I'm speculating, but I think ultimately there's individuals like presidents, and then there's a political economy and a political structure around that president. And I think the political economy, like the political structure, the elite figures, the factions that support President Trump are very different now than they were in 2017. And I looked at the motivations and the objectives of that entire collection of elite interests that are around the president, that are now aggressively moving the federal bureaucracy, breaking the federal bureaucracy in some ways, and want to also, in the same fashion, in sort of Silicon Valley disruption era, like break up a lot of these institutional structures that you could imagine kind of having encased in different sort of carapaces the legacy program, right? And whether it's an objective to get at the legacy program, right, or whether it's just an incidental discovery along the way, I don't know. But I think there's a lot of folks out in Silicon Valley that are interested in this subject, that have, I think, a bead on the subject, and would be very curious to sort of get to ground truth. And I would look to, say, Representative Gallagher, who in another era, right, would be the type of guy that would go to be on the board of Lockheed, right, or would get tapped to be a private equity guy at Carlyle Group. Instead, he goes to become head of defense at Palantir, right? That's just sort of me an indication of the shifting power dynamic in U.S. political economy, where now these defense contractors now, right, Anduril, Palantir, a whole host of AI companies that are now very close to the security state, have the power, have the technological capabilities, probably have like the young talent, the brains, and the political juice now in D.C. to sort of call the shots. And the legacy defense primes that used to hold, congressmen, kind of somewhat hostage, right, maybe have lost the juice. And that ultimately is what shifts disclosure structures, is when you have the political system respond to very different centers of power. And I think there could be other consequences of that. But that to me is why Trump 2.0 is just fundamentally different on the subject than 1.0.
You're giving me reason for optimism, Matthew.
Optimism, pessimism, I don't know. I'm an analyst and a realist. I try to be a pragmatist. I don't know what scenario is optimal here. I just think we're heading towards a pattern of disclosure that's, in my view, fundamentally more like there's controlled disclosure, catastrophic disclosure that people talk about. I think it's more like a chaotic disclosure, kind of this ping pong ball where, and disclosure is a process of social sense making. It's not like the release of information, it's the absorption and integration of information into worldviews. And that requires people being ready to have the conversation and to incorporate different levels of this into their worldviews. It isn't just a simple, there's craft that can do things that we can't do. It's a much more complicated, shift in people's understanding of reality.
I mean, there are very legitimate economic concerns too, aren't there? I mean, a large number of the top 100 on the US stock exchange would be dependent on the success of fossil fuels as the primary energy imperative for the world. Imagine if energy was discovered to be freely obtainable from ZPE zero-point energy, quantum vacuum energy. Imagine if that allegation is true, wouldn't it mean that the entire stock exchange of the United States would probably drop dramatically in value overnight?
Well, yes, there's lots of risks. There's financial stability risks. There's stranded asset risks that you just talked about. There is a much more social, much more, I'd say, strategic risk associated with people's inability to discount the future, right? Because even if you had free energy, right, it takes a while to maybe transition that into society, right? You could, depending on the nature of the engineering that's required, et cetera, before you get the energy return on energy investment payoff from that, it could be a dramatic civilizational change, but it might not be an overnight shift. And that inherent uncertainty, right, is what breaks the financial models governing all asset pricing, right? Like the 30-year treasury note, right, is sort of pricing in a smoothly discounted time value of money. And if that is now subject to a radical uncertainty, now people really can't price out anything into the future. People stop. They don't know how to save. Most asset prices in the world now can't fundamentally be priced. And that's not just the top 100, literally every asset, right? Real estate, mortgages, like everything just basically comes to a halt. You couldn't essentially have a pricing mechanism in that type of scenario, which is truly disruptive, right? Which is why I think you need to have, on the technology side, I think it'll be I don't think there's like a snap your finger, a new technology that fundamentally changes the paradigm. That is a risk I'm paying attention to, but I think there's other financial stability risks associated just with like the event of disclosure or that transition period where kind of the preference falsification and the cascade triggers, and that uncertainty is maximal. And then you need to reduce that uncertainty as quickly as possible so that people can then price the future in something like a consistent way. And that's how you get financial markets, is to price the future.
So, Matthew, final question. I want you to put on your crystal ball. What's going to happen? Are we going to see big D disclosure, or is this all going to be swept under the carpet for another 30 years?
I'm never 100%. I think we are on an irreversible path towards the reality of non-human intelligence being a subject of mass awareness. I don't know exactly how soon, but I think that's an irreversible process at this point. And yeah, it's just a matter of the path to that point. Yeah.
Well, I think we'd put on our seatbelts and it's going to be a bumpy ride. But Matthew Pines, thank you so much for giving us your analysis on Reality Check. Look forward to having you on again sometime. And good luck in your new role with the Bitcoin Institute. Maybe one day you can explain to us why we should all buy cryptocurrency. I'm not yet convinced.
I think these are more related subjects than you would imagine.
Thanks very much, Matthew.
Thanks for having me.
We're also going to start doing questions and answers. So if you'd like to send your questions, please, to realitycheck@newsnationnow.com. And you can also catch the show at midnight Eastern on Saturday evenings. See you then.